Whee!
Hello, I am Kent C. Dodds, and I'm excited to do office hours with you all. So what is office hours? Let me share my screen with you really quick, and I can show you the website after I grab this link. Boom. Okay, so office hours is your opportunity to ask me any question that you like. And I'm going to add that YouTube recording live stream here, and we'll pin this message so it is easily accessible. Yeah, so this is your opportunity to ask me anything. I promise I will give the best answer that I can, which most of the time is pretty good, but sometimes I just say I don't know. But I'll do the best I can to answer the questions that you have. Often the questions are related to my material, like Epic React or testing JavaScript, but more often actually it's yeah, it's just all over the place, mostly about coding and stuff. Sometimes we share screens and stuff, and it can be fun. I answer the questions of people who are actually in the Zoom meeting with me right from the get-go. And then if we run out of those questions, then I answer questions that are in Discord. And I completely ignore the live chat on YouTube. So if you're chatting over there, you chat into the void. I'm not going to look at that. Join us on Discord. You can find all the links for everything at kentcdodds.com/office hours. And with that, I do have at least one question in the Discord chat, so we got that to fall back on. But is anybody in the Zoom call, does anybody in the Zoom call have a question right now?
Hi, Kent.
Hey there, Peter. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
Great.
Uh, uh, I was wondering, like, what debugging techniques did you use to figure out the HTML hot reloading, or if it was just like luck, or if
Yeah.
you used
So
something.
what Peter's talking about is on the React Workshop app that powers all of the all my React workshops that are formatted in this way. So there's a shared package that creates this workshop app out of a directory of exercises and stuff. It's pretty cool. And yeah, it makes it really easy for me to spin up workshops and keep them all consistent and stuff. So a few days ago, oh, and you're going to see the funny things I did with commits because I was tired of releases not working. But yeah, a few days ago, I fixed a long-standing issue with hot module replacement for the HTML exercises. So for like the first 4 exercises of the first workshop, these are all 100% just HTML files. And if you open up the isolated page and take a look at the DOM, you're going to see HTML head, body. Like you'll see exactly what you wrote in the HTML file, which is a hard requirement for this. But what actually gets sent from the server is like Webpack stuff. And so like this is all like the index HTML is actually not what you see when you open up this isolated page. So the way that works is I have a little router that just checks what is this page. Oh, it's an isolated page. Okay, and you're trying to get the file that's at final/01.html. So I'm going to grab that file with the because this is all create React app application, and so I'm going to grab that file with the with a raw loader, which just says, here's the file contents. And then I have a bit of code that will take that and stick it in, like totally replace the DOM with that. So it's a little bit tricky, but it works great. And it makes for a really nice learning experience because you're just in an HTML file and everything that you're writing is what you're seeing. It's just awesome. But we had a long-standing problem where hot module replacement wouldn't work. And so like it wouldn't, as you were typing in the HTML file, it would not update what you're seeing, and you had to do a hard reload, which is not fun to do. And actually, when I was recording the videos, I didn't need to worry about this. And so a lot of people complained. They said, hey, in the videos, you don't have to reload, but when I'm doing the exercise, you do. So like, that's not fun. So I found out the first thing that I did when I was working on this was I downloaded the repo like 5 times, and I just checked out different commits and installed all the dependencies on each one of those. And I found the one commit that made the big change or that broke the experience because it was working before. And the one commit was when I updated from React Scripts version 3 to version 4 or whatever. So I updated React Scripts. Any major change to React Scripts is like all tooling changed. So like something in this enormous release changed. And so that was unhelpful. I was pretty sure that there was something weird with Webpack that changed because they upgraded. I think they skipped a version of Webpack or something. So it was, yeah, something changed there. So I was like, okay, well, there's nothing I can do about like seeing change logs or anything. But that's always my first step is find the commit that where things were busted. And so then the next thing that I did, and maybe it'd be easier to show this than anything else. So let me, whoops, pull this up. So if I get this, I should have got this up and running right from the start. This is the ultimate fix. I'll just give you a spoiler alert. The one thing there's a bunch of changes in here that were like, oh, I should probably make a slight change to that. This is the reason that it wasn't working right there.
Yeah, the early return, yeah.
Yeah, and so what this is when my router decides, oh, okay, you're trying to render an isolated exercise, it sees, oh, okay, /isolated. That means we're just going to render this one thing by itself, and so we call this render isolated. And I can't remember exactly why I did this, but at some point, if there's not a root element, I wasn't thinking about the HTML files. I was just thinking about the actual React applications. So if there wasn't a root element, then there's something wrong. And so I just, oh, okay, well, we'll just return and not do anything there. Yeah, and that busted it. I don't think that that's what caused the problem because I added this within the last few weeks. So I may have like sort of accidentally fixed it, but then I broke it again or something. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but that's not what your question was about. You're just asking, how did I debug this? So where I started was I pulled this up and I looked at the network tab, because anytime that you change a file like hello, I saw that, okay, it is recompiling, it knows that I changed the file, and then I'd come over here and I'd say, okay, and it is requesting that file. Like, so we are actually trying to get that hot update. So like that part is all working.
Hey, Kent, quick question. Yeah. That file that you just showed us where that root element check was in, what is that file?
Yeah, so this is inside the React Workshop app. This is under the hood, the thing that takes this URL and finds the file that you're trying to render, which in our case is this 01.html in the exercise directory. So, so yeah, I could see that the hot update was coming in, but it wasn't updating. And so then the next thing that I did was, oh, okay, I need to step through the code and figure out why this update isn't happening. What I did for that, well, actually, sorry, I think at this point I decided, okay, let's just make a totally isolated thing that's like separate from React Workshop app. Let's just make sure that you can do hot module reloading with the raw loader. So I made a mini project that just used the raw loader, and it worked. And so I was like, well, maybe it's because I'm doing this wonky thing with CodeGen. And so I added CodeGen to that, and it still worked. And so then I actually took the snapshot from here. Oh, what? Huh, that's weird. When you hit the T key in GitHub, it's supposed to bring up this UI, but I just hit the T key and it brought it up in master, which is odd. Perhaps because I don't know why. Anyway, so I was looking for the CodeGen snapshots. And so this is the code that's generated when we do this CodeGen module exports, CodeGen stuff. And so I copied all of this into the file so that I could have like without code gen, just like get rid of code gen. And then I removed all of the stuff in here that had nothing to do with exercise 1, so that I could just like shrink it down to as minimal stuff as possible, as few moving pieces as possible. And that still didn't really do a whole lot for me. So what I eventually did was I took this if module hot except, and what that will do is it just says if hot module replacement is enabled, then I want you to say that this module can get hot replaced or whatever. So that means that when this file or any of its dependents change, this file can get reevaluated. That's what we're saying right here. So I tried this, stuck a debugger right there, and there it is right there. So I would step in and step into that. And so now I'm in Webpack code, and I realized that right here, we're actually in the code that's responsible for bootstrapping a new, or for creating a new module. So every new module that's created is gonna go through some of this code right here. But one thing that, and so this isn't what happens when a new file is updated. This is just registering this module for HMR. So it's not exactly what I'm looking for, but one thing that you'll notice in these files that come in, they're calling this Webpack hot update file or function. And so if we can come over here and look for that, then you'll see this is where that's defined. And so if we just put a breakpoint in there, then we can make our change right here. Yo. We'll save that, and here we land in there. So what happened when I hit save is Webpack's like, oh, something changed. Let me go request that new version of the file, which is going to make this network request and ultimately execute this code. And that's and you'll see, like I noticed right here, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is exactly what I have in here. It's yo. So like it is the right file. I am getting this code. And so that was encouraging. There was just something weird about, and in my mind, I was just thinking, okay, so Webpack is just, it's getting all of the contents, but it's just deciding to not update. For some reason, it's just deciding to not, and what I wanted to have happen is, because I have this if module hot in the code gen stuff, I need it to just say, rerun this whole file again, because it's mostly pure, and so it ends up that ends up working out to have it just rerun. And that's how I designed it from the get-go, is I wanted it to be able to just rerun and it'll update everything automatically. So I'm on this breakpoint now, and I dive into this, and I pretty much just kept on diving into a bunch of methods like forever and ever. And eventually, I'm not sure where it, at some point I got into, oh shoot, no, I think it may have been this right here. Yeah, I missed it, dang it. Okay, here, we'll put a breakpoint right there and play through. Okay, let's do that again, yos, and we'll play through and then go into there. Man, I remember I stepped through a whole bunch of stuff to finally get into a different file. Let's just keep going really quick and see if I can find, because it wasn't in Bootstrap, it was in a different file. Where there's a bunch of other stuff. Okay, so once you jump into promise stuff, you can't just step through anymore, which is a bummer. And so you can, actually, we can just right click here and say continue to here. We'll just continue until we get to there, and we never get there, I guess. I can't remember. Man, there was somewhere. Nope, that's not it.
I don't think you're going to be able to recreate your serendipity in 5 minutes.
There's a file in here, and it's actually not all that long, that's responsible for actually performing the update. And I stepped through that a lot. Spent a lot of time in there. Let me see if I can remember. There was here. Actually, I probably can grep for this because it's I use rip grep, which is way faster than grep.
Good thing you record for posterity too.
Sorry, what?
So it's a good thing you record for posterity too.
Yeah. Okay, so we have I was looking for process env oh shoot. Fast, I think refresh. I think that's what it is. It might be like React fast refresh. Yeah, here it is. Boom. It's the Webpack Hot Dev Client. So Webpack Hot Dev Client. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so this is where I got really confused. So I'd say update, save that. It would recompile, it would run, and we just keep going. Right there. Okay. So we'd get right here where we'd say handle apply updates. And so this is where I'm thinking, well, the way that I got to this file is I was like, I'm pretty sure with this, I just want a automatic like reload. This isn't like hot module replacement. This is just like reload the whole thing. That's actually not correct, but that's what I was thinking. What actually happens is it throws away the old modules and just reruns the modules. It doesn't need to do a full page refresh. But that's what I was thinking. And so that's how I ended up in here. And I found, okay, window location reload. That's what I want. And I spent a long time incorrectly thinking that's what I wanted to have happen.
Yeah, I saw that on live stream.
Oh, yeah. So I came in here and I was like, okay, has fast refresh. I guess you cannot have it reload if you have fast refresh enabled. So I turned it off to get this false, but for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how to make it say wants force reload, because for that, you either have to have an error when you're applying the updates, which I don't know how to make it have an error when applying the updates, or you have to have no updated modules apparently, or you have to have had an error, a runtime error. And it's like, I'm not going to make a runtime error just to get a reload. So, but for some reason, I just stuck on this for a long time. Oh, whoops.
Yeah, for any juniors listening to this recording, that's called the rabbit hole based on the wrong assumption.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit of nerd sniping there too. Like, this is my weakness. This is my kryptonite. I see something and I'm just like, this doesn't matter in my life, but I have to know. I'm going to spend a ridiculous amount of time trying to figure this out. So anyway, I spent a long time on that. And then I finally was like, you know what? I think it actually is running my stuff. I think it is. It is updating my stuff. And so then the next thing that I did was I went into node modules, Kent CDODs, React Workshop app, dist, and then into the file that is actually supposed to be running again. And there's the function that I'm calling is make KCD workshop app right here. And so I added a console log right here and it logged. I was like, oh, okay. So that's, yeah, it's logging. But what drove me crazy is that it would log the first time when you initially came to the page, it would log the second time, but then it would no longer log. So there was something weird going on with after a single refresh, it wouldn't continue to refresh. And I was like, what? I don't understand what's going on. Eventually, I started just moving the log around, and it was really difficult to I just had to keep moving it down the process, and you'd have to turn off the server or stop the server, start it again, because I'm editing node modules and they cache that. And so I'd stop it, start it, stop it, start it. And eventually I found myself inside render isolated. And oh, one other fun fact about this is that the React Workshop app was compiled down to support like IE 11. And so all of this async away and const and like arrow functions, everything was like regenerator runtime stuff. Like it was very, very difficult. So I was like, you know what? Maybe for some libraries and stuff, it still makes sense to do IE 11. But this is like, I'm teaching developers. None of them are using IE 11. So
to support that, Kent, JP Morgan Chase, right before I left, dropped all support for IE 11 throughout the whole company.
Yeah. Hallelujah. Yeah. So I think I need to update KCD scripts to just default to not support IE 11 anymore. But to fix this, was actually pretty easy, because KCD script supports where is it, browser list. And so I just said, and actually this was interesting. So originally this was last 2 Chrome versions, but then that included the nullish coalescing operator and the Elvis operator, whatever that one's called. I can't ever remember. But apparently those 2 work in Chrome, but Create React App can't parse those for some reason. So like when I would import this, Webpack would say, I'm going to need a loader for that, yo. And I was like, no, you're not, because those are like, but okay. And so then that's when I switched to Chrome greater than or equal to 79, because yeah, 79 was when they added, or was the last version that didn't have support for those two operators. So anyway, I got it compiled in a way that was sensible so that I could actually like debug this. This was a disaster. And then I kept on going, and I finally found that document, like it was this line right here. If I would comment that out, then everything, it didn't work because you need this to make it actually work. But the hot module replacement or the HMR would actually work. It would continue to evaluate it. I would see my consoles every single time I made a change. It just wouldn't update the document. So I spent a long time trying to think, okay, so when I like, there must be some sort of difference between like maybe Webpack keeps a hold on the original document element. And so it's interacting with the old one, just hanging out in memory. And I've got this new one, and that's why it's not working. Spent like 20 minutes on that, and then realized that can't be it, because I went back to that small isolated project and I did this exact same thing and it still worked. So I was like, no, there's something else that's weird. And if, yeah, like I actually copied all of this code. This is interesting. So this is all of the code that you need to be able to take an HTML string and replace the entire document and have all of the JavaScript, like all the script tags and everything get evaluated. It's a disaster, but it works. It works great. So anyway, I thought, well, there's something weird going on, because if I have this in, then my console logs don't make it. If I don't, then my console logs do. I can't remember exactly what it was. I think I actually started stepping through. That's what it was. So I put a debugger up like further at the top, and I stepped through the first time, and it went through everything like normal. And then the second time, I came down to write, where is it? Root. Yeah, no, that's not it. I actually changed a bunch of code. So let me think. I'll give you an older broken version. Here we go. And so if we go to, what is this? This is the index, I think. There we go. So I was stepping through, and I came down to right here, and that's when I realized, oh, that's why this is busted. So I went through the first time, it all worked. And then as I was going through the second time, I came right here and I saw that root L is null. The reason that root L was null is because when you run these HTML files, remember, we're totally demolishing the original HTML document. And so because of that, yeah, we no longer have a root. That root is gone. And so because that root is gone, this returns null, and I did it early exit. And so I changed things around quite a bit with the way this all works. And now the functionality that I needed this for is now like kind of changed so that it only happens on the React side, because when we're doing React stuff, we do need to have a root like that, because that needs to be in place for us to render and unmount and stuff like that. And so I moved all of this out of the render isolated, and in fact, it ended up moving into the render function, which handles like if we're doing concurrent mode or non-concurrent mode, and it does all that. This has all been changed around a little bit too. But yeah, so I moved that use case over to just the part that cares about it, the React, and now everything works. And in the process of doing this, I also discovered that hot module replacement on our markdown files was also totally busted. So now you can, I mean, people aren't editing the markdown. They shouldn't be. But like it was totally busted. Like if you tried to edit it, then it would give you the error boundary of death and stuff. So now this works. And so that was cool too. So we get a full update of all the things. So anyway, hopefully that was sort of interesting.
Yeah, nice. Thanks. Yeah, what a story.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Might be an interesting blog post or a talk or something actually.
Yeah, definitely would be a great talk. I mean, honestly, like halfway through that, when I was watching you do it last week, I probably would have just been like, this is a feature.
Yeah, we want you to hit Command R over and over and over. Yeah, that was a fun one. So thanks for asking. Okay, cool. Anybody else in the Zoom have a question before I go over to the Discord? We've gotten a couple questions in there.
Actually, I do.
Yeah, what's up?
Hey, I asked it over on Discord. It was basically, it's in the help channel, and I didn't think copying and pasting it in the office hours was necessary. I asked it earlier today, but basically like kind of an approach to quickly transforming a component from being its own little black box into being able to control it. Would use effect in that child be a good use case?
I see. So what this is doing is it, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're synchronizing internal state with the state that's being passed in?
Pretty much, yeah. Basically like for like resetting it via form, but it's like a bit of a complicated component that like takes a picture and manages all the pictures you took and displays them. So I want to be able to like drop it into a form all over the app without having to like pull all that logic out into the parent for each one of those places. Like I want to be able to just be like, boom, here's the component. If I hit reset on the form, it updates the component because the outer state gets updated. And I thought that would be a good use effect use case? Question mark.
So synchronizing state is dangerous.
Yeah.
And yeah, it sounds like you know that. So, which is probably why you're asking.
Yeah, I'm like, this works, but it's probably bad.
Yeah. So there, it's unlikely that you'd ever fall out of sync. That's what use effect is supposed to guarantee you, right? And so you should be okay there. But it still can get hairy, and it's you've got a problem with the performance as well, because you're going to re-render this component twice. You render it once with the internal state, and then you'll render it again with the updated state. So it's not optimal for performance either.
Yeah.
So one thing that you'll want to make sure that you do if you do go this route is instead of a use effect, you'll want to use layout effect, because otherwise you could get a flash of the previous state, and now you've got the new state.
Right.
Which is unlikely to ever. I'm trying to think of when that would ever actually happen, because let's say the parent re-renders, and so and the child was at a certain state, parent re-renders, the child's still at that state, so probably nothing will change for the child. And then it will trigger a re-render because that updated state from the parent. And so I don't think you'd ever get a flash, but probably just for good measure, go with the layout effect. I guess what might happen is you get the parent re-renders everything, and then the child re-renders thereafter, and that would just look kind of funny.
Which actually I think I see elsewhere in the app where that sort of that use effect style got implemented. And I'm thinking back and going, oh yeah, the rest of the component updates, and then that child updates. So yeah,
so it happens.
Yeah, slight delay.
Especially when we're talking about forms. Often I've seen like some really big, long forms, and those can eat at your performance budget pretty quick. So yeah, like doing anything that's suboptimal for performance is suboptimal.
Instead of this custom hook and like flip-flopping the state between parent and child, what about just having a localized context?
You mean so the parent could set the state directly in the context and then the child consumes it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Depending on the use case, that might be advisable. So really, and how do you say your name? Is it Renee?
Oh, it's Renee.
Renee.
Yeah.
So what is the like there? So clearly there's something that the child does. There's like logic in there that you want to keep in the child because it's useful, because then it's reusable. You don't want to force the parent to implement that logic, because then everywhere you use it, the parent also has to do that.
Yeah.
Is that so?
Yeah, it's basically that use custom hook is like the simplified version of like, this is what the child does. Like it takes the photos, it displays the photos, like all that stuff is that custom hook. So I could pull that out into the parent. But now everywhere I want to use that component, I have to remember, oh yeah, and I got to use this custom hook in the parent so that I can pass down all that stuff.
Yeah. But that said, if you so the parent wants to control something, is it that like, does the parent always want to control that thing? Like everywhere you're using this component, does every parent need to be able to control that?
Oh, good question. I think so, at least at this stage, because it's basically being used to take pictures and save them. You know, like it's I think everywhere it's part of some type of form.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like what you you already have to do some work to every time you use this component, right?
Yep.
There's already extra work you have to do in addition to using the component. So I think that it would probably be best to do what you were suggesting of, let's just have all this stuff in the custom hook. Whenever you use this component, you also have to use this custom hook.
Cool.
And you could pass it arguments for like, here's when I want it to reset, or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I threw together something doing just that, where I just pulled all that logic out and the child was just an idiot that showed what you passed it. It was just like, yep, thank you.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the most advisable direction to go without like spending another 20 minutes looking at the implementation and stuff. That's what sounds like.
Yeah.
You'd be better off and you'll end up with better performance and you'd be able to avoid any of the potential problems of synchronizing state.
Yeah. And probably a bit too complicated to go down the like control props route or the state reducer pattern route or any of those like advanced things. Seems like I'm probably better off just keeping it simple and remembering this hook goes along with this component. Done. Yeah.
And in regard to the control prop or state reducer, control prop is really only useful if you want to be able to control it sometimes and not all the times. But it sounds like you pretty much always want to control it.
I think so, yeah. It doesn't make sense that you would have it outside of the context of a form because you're taking these pictures to save to the database, basically, sort of situation. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, yeah, good luck.
Yeah, my gut was okay then. Sweet, thanks.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Yeah. Anyone else here in the Zoom have a question before I go back to our chat here?
I have a question related to testing.
Yeah, what's up, Tiger?
Hi. When it comes to writing tests, let's say you're working on a product, how do you enjoy writing tests? You know, there's test-driven, behavior-driven. How do you approach writing tests when you're implementing a feature, let's say?
Yeah. So like we've got maybe a new page or a drop down that we're putting onto this page or something like that. So it comes down to what part of this needs to not break. So like the first thing that I'm doing is deciding whether it needs to be tested at all. So normally, in most cases, I'd say the answer is yes, but not always. So like you got to keep that in mind. Once you've decided that, yes, this does need to be tested, then the next thing is, do I need to test all of this? Maybe there are edge cases here that would be nice to have tested, but there are other priorities that are more important, like, the business will fail if we do not finish this feature. That matters more than testing. So yeah, that would be. Sorry, what?
You think so? I've heard different things like
some people get really dogmatic about testing and they automatically assume that I'm that way because I'm the testing guy. I am not that way. I would much rather be in business than have tests.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah. I can't understand anybody who would disagree with that. So, yeah. So most of the time you can have your business and test it too, right? Like, but there are times where you're like, if you're a startup and you've got like 2 months of runway and 3 months of work, then testing is out the door for me in that scenario. I'm just hitting this hard, and maybe I'll write a couple high level tests that run in my CI, some like end-to-end tests to make sure that like critical features aren't broken. But like in that environment, there's no way you're going to get me to test the settings page or something like that. Like, no way. But most of us aren't in that environment. Most of the time we're just chugging along, building our features and stuff. But yeah, just want to make sure that's clear. If you've got a short runway and a lot of work to do, code quality is negotiable, or confidence is negotiable. And there are things that you can do to get enough confidence to be able to keep running.
That's
I think you just gotta keep it in mind as time passes, and not be like, okay, I'm gonna forget this. But yeah, I definitely agree with you.
Yeah. So anyway, once you, sorry, go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's like you just mentioned. It's a really good case for just smoke tests. Like, does the app not blow up when you start it? Cool. Let's write features.
Yeah. So there are trade-offs in all this stuff, and the mistake that some people make is tests aren't worthwhile. That is incorrect. On the other side of things, the other mistake that people make is our app isn't like, our app can't make money if it's not tested. That is also incorrect. And sometimes people don't realize that working on tests costs as the runs on the same currency as working on features, and that currency is your time. And so so you have to decide where you're going to be spending this currency to get the most return on your investment. A new feature that you add to your product and get 1 million new customers is absolutely worth more return on investment than a test that makes sure that the existing features don't break, right? So like it's all trade-offs, but that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that that tests run on the same currency as everything else that you can do with your time. Because that's what it takes, is your time. So anyway, sorry, Jacob, go ahead.
No, got another one for you. Is if you work in a place where you're getting like Jira tickets or something like that, and you get a bug ticket, when you fix that bug, that's also a good time to write a test. Just saying.
Yeah. So
that's nice.
As you're adding this feature, you've decided, okay, it's worth the test. We have we need to write a test. We need to be confident that this feature will continue to work in the future. And I should be clear, like most of the time, the answers to these questions is yes, I should have a test for this. It's not done until it's tested. Yeah, so then it's time to decide, okay, what level of tests should I be writing here? Some features you're going to be writing every level of tests, like with maybe you're adding a calculator to compute the difference in currencies or something like that. I'm thinking of a specific example when I was at PayPal.
I actually have a question on top of that right here. Is would you also write unit tests for critical operations such as payment, authentication, or would you just rely on integration and E2E?
Well, so that's a good question. I'm kind of getting at that. But yeah, make sure that I don't that I don't miss anything about your question. So when I was at PayPal, I implemented this one feature where you could change which currency you're using to send money, and different currencies have different what's the word I'm looking for? No, not specificity. It's precision. So like
Mm.
the yen does not have a decimal. There's no decimal in the yen. And then also different locales have a different character for that precision. So lots of European countries have a comma instead of a period for the decimal, for example. And then as you on this input, as you continue typing numbers, if you get into the thousands place, then that character will also be different. It'll be comma or decimal depending on where you are. And so I had a single function that handled all of this. So you'd have some input coming in, and we had to convert that number into something that we could display. And so we'd get that number, and then we'd also get the currency that we were using. And if this was interesting too, if you typed in like $23 or $2,342.25, then you'd have a comma for the thousands and then a decimal for the period. But then if you switch to a different locale or switch to a different currency, then we'd have to say, okay, well, there was a decimal of 0.25. We're switching to the yen, which is, we had to get rid of that decimal. So there was a lot of different things that we had to think about with this. And so I took all of that functionality, put it into a pure function, and then I unit tested the crap out of that thing. I just like tons of unit tests. And then when you integrate that, call that function in your React component, then I wrote a integration or component test that ran that component, but I did not do all of the different features that function could do, because I knew that the features of that function were well tested by itself. And so I just did all of the thing. I made sure that I covered all of the cases for the integration to that function, not everything that function could do. So you make sure that, like, okay, if I call that function with a different input, then something changes, and just make sure that I cover at least that. So yeah, anyway, when you're building your new feature, you're going to have some things that are really complex. You'll put them in separate functions, you unit test those things, and then you have the pieces that are integrating all of those complex things together. You do an integration test, and sometimes the little units that you create are not complex at all. Like it's just a function that maybe has an if statement or two. That's not very complex. I wouldn't bother unit testing that. That will be handled when you do the integration test. So normally when I'm thinking about this, I'm unless I can just intuit that, like, yeah, this is a complex function, I need to unit test this. Unless I just know that from just seeing it, and you gain that intuition over time. Then I'm going to start with the integration test, and then I'm going to look at the coverage report, and I'm going to be like, oh wow, there's a lot of use cases for this particular functionality that I did not cover in my integration test. And so then it's a decision of, do I want to add some more integration tests that will cover those branches, or would that just be a lot of extra work? I'd be over testing this integration point, and I just take that as a smaller unit. And then from an end-to-end standpoint, I always like to have at least one happy path end-to-end test for my particular functionality. And that lots of my end-to-end tests are actually quite long and cover many features. And so like it may end up being, well, this is not an entirely new page by itself. This is like a feature within a couple other features. So I'm going to just add something to an existing test to cover the happy path for my thing. Or you're like, no, this is totally by itself and it's really critical to the business. So I'm going to add a handful of end-to-end tests that cover maybe not only the happy path, but also some of the sad paths as well, for those super critical things.
Critical could be authentication, payment, etc. Like those very expensive things for a certain product.
Yeah. So the question that you ask is, how bad would it be if this broke? And if it's like our business would go out of business, then yeah, you want to test that really, really well.
All right.
If it's every second that this is broken, then we're gonna lose $1. I mean, that's probably pretty bad too. If it's we'll lose $1,000, that's like really bad. Make sure you test that. And if you're PayPal scale, then like every minute you're losing like 10 grand or maybe 100 grand. Yeah, that would not be good. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good luck. Cool. Anyone else in the Zoom call before I go over to Discord?
Hey Kent.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Harsh. Yeah, I had a question. So the other day I was asked for my company to make a website, just kind of like a static website, and I haven't done a static website in quite a while. I mean, I've been mostly focused on React so long that, it's been a long time since I've written just like raw, HTML, CSS, JavaScript without any of the tooling in place that makes that stuff a lot easier. So I guess my question is like, when's the last time you've done a static website? And if so, like, are you do you have a certain process that you go about it? Do you just end up going to something like Gatsby and just making, a static site? My only kind of hesitation is that, I don't need any reactivity in my site. So why should I use some of those tools? But then I've gotten the other side, which is, well, just use the tools that make your life easier. Who cares about what you're pushing to the client as long as it's fast enough? So yeah, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And the answer has a lot of nuance to it, a ton. So a lot of it has to do with like, and you don't have to answer these questions. These are just some of the things that you should be thinking about. Are there other people on the team who are going to be contributing to this? And if there are, then we need to keep in mind their skill set and what they can do. And like, am I going to be at the company forever? Probably not. And so maybe I should make sure that whatever I do is not just some weird finagle, like I'm going to go to Haskell and we'll generate DOM HTML with Haskell. Like, don't do stuff like that. That is not a nice thing to do for the company, unless the website is only going to be up for a month or something and nobody needs to maintain it. Then like go hog wild. I don't care. Do whatever you want. And then another thing to consider is like, how important is performance to you? Is it okay? Well, if there's no interactivity on the website at all, it's just a bunch of links, then it doesn't matter what tool you use to generate the HTML, because all you're going to send over is HTML and CSS. Even if you use Gatsby or Next or anything, you can, well, I don't know about Gatsby, but I'm pretty sure even with Gatsby, you can just say, do all of your static generation, but don't rehydrate on the client. So it doesn't send any JavaScript whatsoever. And then if you need to like sprinkle in a little bit of interactivity with like pretty much every solution, you have some ability to say, let's just dangerously set inner HTML. Here's a script tag. and you write your just a couple of little sprinkle some JavaScript on top of this thing. So this is actually one area where I'm really excited about Remix, because they make it really easy for you to do that sort of thing. And actually React server components are going to be really great for this sort of a use case as well. But then let's step outside of React. So if you decide, hey, this is totally static, I don't really want to rehydrate or anything, there are lots and lots of static site builders that don't send any JavaScript to the client. And if that's exactly what you're looking for, then you can find a lot of great static site builders for that. Like some that are very old and some that are pretty new.
Yeah, there's also just templating languages like what Handlebars, Mustache. I think Jekyll is something that's used for like really static site building.
Yeah, they're like time proven static site generators. Personally, those don't excite me very much. But like, I mean, there's a reason that they're still going. So Renee just sent in the Zoom chat about 11T, which I've heard cool things about.
Yeah, that's the other one that I've been looking into, 11T. But,
yeah. So I haven't used it at all or anything. For me, I'm not super excited about static site generators because it just really limits you on what you can do. So if you are 100% sure there will never be interactivity on this site, we never need JavaScript here, then yeah, okay, maybe a static site generator is okay. but if I were building something, then I would want to make sure that I'm productive in the tool. And so I'm going to be doing something with React. And so like that, for me, that means Next, because if you go with Gatsby, then you're pretty much stuck with the static site generation methodology. There's no other way to do it. And if eventually you decide, you know what, there are a couple pages on here that I actually want to server render sometime in the future, then with Gatsby, you're just stuck. You can't. It is not a thing. You cannot server render that stuff. So this is why I would not choose Gatsby for that. And I would go with Next because it has the ability to do both. But also there's Remix, and that I'm really, really excited about Remix. And if I were in your shoes right now, I know Remix isn't production ready officially, but right now I'm actually working on a project, and it's a total rewrite of kentcdodds.com, and it's going to be lit, by the way. And that's like a couple months out, but I'm building it in Remix right now. So like I'm making a decision like this, and I'm choosing Remix. There was another thought that I had, and the cool thing about Remix is that it also can do both. You can do static site generation with Remix, even though it's not technically a feature. You can do it, and you can also, like, it's built for server-side rendering, and you have total control over the cache. It's amazing. It's really, really awesome. But maybe not, like, if you're not super into being on the bleeding edge, then maybe stay away from Remix right now. Yeah, there was one other thing. Svelte is also a big one that people seem to love for websites. I haven't done much with that, but people seem to love it. So you can go look at that one too, I guess.
Yeah, I'll definitely check out Remix. That's like the project that the guy behind React Router is working on, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen it come across a bunch of times, just never ended up checking it out. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty early. Like it's officially a developer preview. There are features that you're probably used to from other things that are missing right now. But like I think it's going to be huge. It's really awesome. I really enjoy it. So for a static site, it has a lot of really cool features that might not be very interesting to you for as far as static, but like comparing it to Gatsby or something, the nice thing is you don't have to learn GraphQL to query the file system and stuff. So there's that. Is this going to be like a content heavy site? Like, are you?
It's literally, well, I mean, full disclosure, I've sort of made the decision that based on like engineering effort, it might just be simple enough to go to like WordPress and do something, with WordPress. But it was going to be just like a marketing site, like here's our product and this is what it does, and you should contact us.
Yeah. So Remix could totally do that. They're like the biggest challenge that you'll have with sites like that is often the marketing team wants to be able to change the content, and so you'll probably want a CMS. And Gatsby has great integrations with lots of CMSs. I don't know about Next because I haven't done much with Next, but I think that it has good integrations with lots of CMSs. In any case, whatever you build, you're probably going to want to have some easy way for the marketers to update that content.
Right.
So
there's also two other like frameworks that I would suggest. That one's in the React world still, and it's also similar to the ones we're talking about, which is Blitz.js. That one's something you can look into. I've heard great things. It's purely.
I think Blitz is more for applications though. Like it's built on top of Next, and it has like authentication built in and a bunch of other stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you could use it, and it has conventions and stuff that might be useful. But I do feel like that one's much more for applications. So is Remix, to be fair. Like Remix is
and that's the thing. And the other one is Redwood.js, and that one's a Jamstack like Gatsby, but it's like not React or GraphQL based at all. So they're just things you can look into, since it looks like you're being given a green field, and kind of just like being told like, hey, do whatever you want. And,
Yeah, basically I'm literally the only lead front end engineer. It's hidden, everyone else is DevOps or software, so I literally I can do whatever I want.
Dude, Harsh, I've been there and that is so awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also fun, but it's also kind of like
Lonely?
well, it's more like I don't if I have a question or I have an issue with something, I can't go to anyone else. Like, or I can't even go to my boss and go, hey, can you help me out with this? Because he like there's like a knowledge like a gap. So I kind of go, oh, let me figure it out. And
Yeah.
My
super
team,
duper been there.
my team all data engineers right now, so I feel you.
We were, you guys were talking about Next a little bit, and I just had another question about Next, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So like, part of the, the other side of the marketing site is like this dashboard, like just basically a dashboard that, does a bunch of stuff. And I hadn't experimented around with Next, and I started using Next, and I quickly realized like I was getting into some very strange issues. Because my initial approach was I wanted this to be headless and just kind of post it on a CDN somewhere. But it seems like Next is very geared towards, well, you really should have like a backend, server somehow associated. And so maybe I kind of want to talk about, or maybe you could answer like your experience using. Have you ever used Next as like a headless framework? Because I ran into a lot of issues where I felt like Next just wasn't capable enough, and because of the fact that it, like from small stuff like doing, is window undefined on every, every page, to like I even like there was a really dumb issue that I spent maybe an hour on, which is I wanted to render, or I wanted a random number generated on every refresh, and Next would like just render like on build time, like just render the number and then display it, and I had to put it inside like a use effect or like something else to like get it to just have a random number generated on every refresh.
Yeah, it definitely, when you start talking about server rendering or static site generation, it adds a level of complexity of like, okay, so does this run on the client or on the server? Yeah, so like I can just tell you, I pulled up Glamorous Rocks because this is my only experience directly with Next, and this was years ago. But it is all server rendered, so it can be static. You can turn off JavaScript and navigate, and everything works, except for like stuff that actually requires JavaScript. So like if we change this to whatever, I don't know. Oh, that's the border. You can't really even tell. Say like there. So like that stuff requires JavaScript, but other than that, like everything else works. But so you can use Next without having a database, without even having a server. There's no server behind this. Is all just pushed up to Netlify. I think it might be on Vercel. I can't remember, but yeah. Where was I going with this? Yeah, I forgot. That doesn't really answer your question though? I think
I mean, it's more of a general overall, like, is Next, am I in the right direction when I think that is Next not really, if I'm doing headless, Next is maybe not the best tool for doing like a login dashboard kind of app. Am I in the right direction, or, do you have any opposing
Oh, you
points?
mean for the actual app?
Yeah.
Yeah, Next is absolutely suited for that.
Okay.
Next is super super good for apps. And whether you want it to be mostly client side or server rendered. So Next is really mostly geared for server rendered and then rehydrated on the client. Gatsby is also sort of that because you do server render. It just happens statically. So you're pretty limited, which is why I would not recommend Gatsby. It's just very limiting. Yeah, Remix is also the same. Remix is really good for apps, actually, but and Next is
Where
that's exactly
does
what it's for.
where does Create React App fit into that model? It seems like everyone has their own space. Where is it where, you know what, none of the other tools work, I gotta use Create React App. Like,
Yeah, so Create React App is really, really great for getting started, and a lot of companies use it for their actual product and stuff. Create React App is not good for anything you want super fast and with good SEO. So if you've got something that's behind a login screen and customers pay for access to it, then Create React App is fine because you don't need SEO. And if they're already paying for it, then this is especially useful for enterprise apps where the users don't actually aren't actually the ones paying for it, right? Because it's a difference of 500 milliseconds will not be that big of a deal for people in those types of situations. And so, yeah, Create React App is pretty nice for that. Like, it's really nice because it only runs in the client. So you don't have to worry about like confusion around whether this is on the server or not or whatever. So that aspect of it is pretty nice. Everything else you can do with Create React App, like I mean, you don't have as much control, or you have no control over Webpack or anything like that. But these days, you don't really need that. Like, I haven't customized Webpack in a very long time, since I left PayPal. And even there, like I built the Webpack config and then I just left it. There wasn't a whole lot that I was doing with the Webpack config that was different from Create React App anyway.
So I've also used Webpack, Create React App extensively, and it's in enterprise situations. So those situations have been internal tools. So
yeah,
that really does, like, when people are just like, well, this didn't really render super fast. It's like, cool, it's still like 100 times faster than your 20 or 15-year-old Java application.
Yeah, they'll never say, oh, this didn't render very fast. They'll never say that. They're just like so grateful that it's built in modern tech.
Yeah, I'm in an enterprise situation, and the tool that we currently have that I'm replacing with is like 2002, 2004, written in like and there's like Fortran component. It's very old.
Yeah. All of that said, even in enterprise apps, sometimes as a user, I'm going to use this on my phone in some place with bad connectivity. Like most of the time, or lots of these enterprise apps, this is something you use at work. You're on your computer with fast internet connection. Everything works great. But sometimes I'm going to try and pull this up on my phone and do something with it. And if I have a bad internet connection and it takes a while to load, then that's not great and not a great experience. And if it like fails to load some of the JavaScript, then the whole app is busted. So this is actually where Remix is really, really great, because the way that it implements progressive enhancement is everything server rendered. So it's just sending HTML. So as long as the HTML gets to you, then you're good, which it's very likely to do that, right? If the HTML can't even get to you, then nothing will work. So the HTML gets to you, everything's working. If the JavaScript fails, it actually doesn't matter because it falls back on old web technologies. And so if you've got a form, you punch things in, you hit submit, even if the JavaScript didn't load, it's still going to work. And that is something that would take a lot of work to make happen using anything else that I'm aware of. So yeah, Remix is really well positioned for that sort of use case, which is why if I were in your situation where I'm the only UI dev, I get to choose all the things, I would 100% go with Remix, just because it offers that. I think there's a lot of productivity gains with the developer features that it has. And I think the other thing that I really like about it is the business model of Remix is sustainable. So for everybody else, you're in one of two camps, or maybe a combination of the both. You're either a maintainer who is doing this on their free time and they're just like getting buried in the ground by all these issues from all the users, or even if you have a lot of contributors, as a maintainer with a lot of contributors, that takes a silly amount of time too. You can burn out. It's very difficult. So you're just piling onto that. Or you work at a company and they use open source as a cost of doing business. This is where Next is, frankly. And they're a great company. Vercel is awesome. I love Guillermo. They're great. But that's what it is. That's the way that it's structured. Is Next is a cost of doing business. Now it's an investment because the more people who use Next, the more likely they are going to come over to Vercel. But that's what it is. It is a cost of doing business. With Remix, the product is the thing that you're buying. You're buying this software, and the more users they get, the more they can invest into the thing that everybody's buying. And I really like that structure. And so that's another thing that I take into consideration when I think about stuff like this. Is I'm the money that I'm giving them is making the product better. So anyway, those are a bunch of thoughts on that. I know that I'm like fanboy on Remix big time, but I really
Get
like
me
it.
really excited about Remix content.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, I'll definitely check it out at the very least and like sign up for whatever license they have and see how it feels. But yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
There is one option we didn't mention yet. It's like if you just write index HTML and do batch and stuff there, like HTML, CSS.
Yeah.
It's true.
Show it
Like
to the marketing people and then decide afterwards. Like after you find out some problems with that, and then you will have some more idea how to compare the frameworks.
Yeah, no joke. Seriously, the biggest challenge with that is when the marketing people want to make changes to content, but to get started, like that's okay to just put it all in a big index HTML, especially for marketing pages where maybe you'll have a couple of things that are reusable components, but often you don't. Like every single thing is going to be its own little thing, and so yeah, like no joke that. Especially if you have just a handful of pages, that's not a bad way to start. And then when the marketing people start giving you feedback on it and stuff, then you'll have more context to use to make your decision on which direction to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks guys. Yeah, it really helps.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we've been having a great time chatting, and now we are over our time, but I think that I can get through these last questions here pretty quick, unless there were any other questions here in Zoom. You're good. Okay, cool. So Sud, I'm not sure how to say this person's name, but they're a really nice person, I'm sure. Using React.lazy in production, some of the chunks. Oh, yes. So sometimes JavaScript will fail to load for who knows what reason. It's hard to reproduce this. You can. So like if you wanted to just test things out, then you go ahead and build. Do the full build, production build, and then go in and make a change to one of the chunks to have it have a syntax error or like delete it. So it's a 404, like rename it or something. So you can reproduce it. Probably not in development though, unless you can get into the Webpack's dev server or something. That'd be weird. You could proxy it, I guess. But yeah, so you can reproduce it by either making the script fail to parse, or by making it just not there, so 404, or put a proxy in front of it and give you back a 403 or whatever you want it to do. Yeah, so there's not really a way to make sure it doesn't happen. You have to just trust your tools that they're going to put the files in the right spot. But there are things that you can do, and other situations where it can happen in the wild are like I'm on a phone and my network is not reliable, and so just the request failed for some reason. So yeah, so you reproduce it using the ways that I'm suggesting, and then you figure out a good way to handle it gracefully. So when you do a so with React.lazy, you're going to use a suspense component that'll have a fallback. But if it fails to load at all, then it's going to, an error will be thrown, and it will just go up to, to the closest error boundary. And so you can put an error boundary around, whatever part of the UI it makes the most sense, and then make it look nice. Say sorry, but your internet connection is the worst, and I can't do anything for you. Whatever you want to do with that. So error boundaries is the answer there. Hopefully that is helpful. I'm going to just mention answered this toward the end. Okay. I'm sorry. Is it Lean or Leon? I can't remember how to say your name.
Good enough.
Well, tell me, is it Leon?
Close enough, man. It's Leon.
Leon. Okay, yeah, Leon. I can remember this. All right, so Leon, you're asking about between fetch and Axios. Somebody did share my blog post about this. Yeah, and then keeping API-based URLs and bearer tokens and stuff. So yeah, and you actually shared that. So I don't think that I would. Yeah, I don't think I'd ever use Axios these days. We have just really good, like fetch works really nicely. And so, yeah, I probably would just go with the generic fetch wrapper. And then I actually, it'd be fun to revisit this with the TypeScript lens and see how you can make a generic fetch wrapper that gives you nice TypeScript. And there are probably some that exist already, like slim fetch wrappers that have a nice TypeScript interface that you can use. I know that there's one by Sindre Soros that I've used before, and it's pretty good, called Kai, K-Y. Yeah, it's all right. It has a couple of benefits over fetch. Some of the API seems kind of weird to me, but yeah, it's mostly pretty good. So that would be one to look at. And I don't know, it looks like it does have built-in types. So that's cool that it comes shipped with types. And there's probably generics where you say, this is the, my response type or something like that. That's probably where I would go over Axios. I would try Kai first. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I don't know why you're going away from Axios, but I'm also leaning more towards fetch.
Yeah, so the main motivation for me is Axios is great, has lots of really awesome features, but it also is quite large. So I'm actually personal friends with the creator of Axios. It's Matt Zabriskie. He is co-organizer of React Rally. And I was there when he created Axios, actually. We were at a conference together at Midwest JS. And he's like, dude, I'm going to take AngularJS's $HTTP service and make it like a legit just vanilla library. And he did it that night in his hotel room. And the next day he showed me, it's like, look, it's a thing. I was like, that's awesome, dude. So that's where Axios came from. And I think it's great. He's no longer maintaining it. And he never released a 1.0, which I still don't understand why he didn't do that. But the maintainers that took over, they haven't done it either. So it's still like 0.16 or 17 now. So yeah, that's just an aside. I kind of
there's also just like the benefit of using like a native API. Like
they're using XHRs still.
Yeah, and so personally though, I personally like fetch. If I don't use fetch, I tried got recently, which is kind of cool. But overall, I had an issue with the last company where we were using Axios, and it started giving me like infosec errors in SNCC. And I went to Axios, and Axios like, it's not a real security vulnerability. And I was like, that's not a thing. So so I since then have moved to just like using just fetch for everything myself, just to avoid stuff like that. And that's mainly the only reason.
Yeah, that's kind of odd. Anyway, for the second part of your question about where I keep API-based URLs and stuff, the way that I do it is actually exactly the way I do it in the Bookshelf app for Epic React. So here in the .env is where I have React app API URL and auth URL and any other base URLs I'd put in there. And then in the, what am I looking for? It's in utils. API client. Here we go. I just assign those there, and then that's all my requests are made with that as the base. And then I also use the auth URL in the auth provider. Oh no, that's the auth context. There we go. Let's see. Oh, actually, no, it will be. Oh, it is in the auth provider. Anyway, yeah. So that's pretty much where I put that. For the bearer tokens and stuff, like if you have like a third-party token that you're making a third-party request or something, that's going to go in your environment variables. You'll probably have a .env local that isn't committed to the repository, and just everybody copies that over. They make their own tokens, or however you manage that. And then you could also have, and then you'd also put that on your CI environment when the project's built. Like you would just want to make sure that if it's really an auth token that can be used to make requests from anywhere, that it is not sent to the front end ever. It would always need to be a backend. Yeah, management of those is all, like, everybody does it differently. There's not a single solution that I'm aware of. So I always just say, I make a .env.example that's like, here are all the things you need to have filled in. If you don't have these, then ask your coworker for what these should be. And then you have a .env.local that everybody just fills in. And then on CI, you have like the actual tokens in there. So yeah, okay, cool. Let's see if we're toward the end. Oh, yes, I remember this one, Eric. Let me see. Oh, yeah. Okay, sweet. It looks like we got an answer there, because I do remember answering that question before. So Eric, hopefully you do find that. I know it's kind of hard to find answers to questions that I've answered. It's hard to organize these. But yeah, good luck. Hopefully you find that. Because that is a much more in-depth thing I don't have time for right now. Can fetch do upload and download progress? I actually haven't used it for that, but I think it can. I would be surprised if there's not a built-in API for this. Steve is asking, is it wrong to replace loading state with suspense? So Steve, maybe you're here, right? Could you clarify a little bit what you mean? So I'm guessing what you're talking about is, I render this component, and in a use effect, I have it go and get some data. Is it okay to replace that loading state with a suspense boundary? Is that what you mean? I can't hear you. I see that you unmuted yourself, but I can't hear what you're saying. Sorry. So go ahead and try and fix your mic, but I'll just proceed assuming that's what you mean. So it's important to remember that suspense for data fetching is not an official API yet. It is quite possible to change. And so I wouldn't rely on it. Some people do. Yeah, still can't hear you, Steve, sorry. So yeah, I wouldn't go with that. Right now, what I'd recommend for data fetching in like client-side data fetching is to just use React Query. It's just so good. And I mean, technically you can enable suspense with React Query, but then you have to turn on concurrent mode to make that work. I just don't recommend this. So right now, as of today, there's no way to use suspense for data fetching reliably. And so, yeah, it's not wrong to replace the loading state with suspense for React.lazy, because that's what is technically supported right now. But for data fetching, I wouldn't recommend it. Hopefully that was your question. Okay, so we're wrapping up. This was fun. Thanks everybody for hanging out with me this fine Saturday. I hope you have a wonderful weekend and a good week. I will be back. So far, like doing Saturdays is, I switch my Saturdays and Fridays. So yesterday I went snowboarding and skiing with my family all day. It was awesome. Yeah, so I plan on continuing this into the foreseeable future. So you can look forward to next week. Let me just double check. Yeah, next week I should be here and it should be a good time.
You snowboard or you ski?
I do both.
Oh.
Yeah, so I took, I've been a lot. And I actually took snowboarding lessons for the first time yesterday. And that was kind of fun. They can tell me all the bad habits that I've developed over the years. And I've got a lot of work to break those. But
Isn't
yeah.
it dangerous during these times with Corona, or are there less people?
It is. Everybody's wearing masks. You don't ride a chairlift with somebody you didn't arrive with. And yeah, and like in the like close quarters areas, because like when you're on the mountain, you're like not 6 feet from people. You're like far from people. So that's not a big deal. It's just in the lines, and everybody's 6 feet away and fully masked up and everything. So yeah, we try to be careful. So anyway, that was fun. Thanks everybody for hanging out. We'll see you all in the future.